D. McClung, Archer Monologues. Welcome. This would be episode 52, 2021. All right, let's tone it down a little bit. Let's just get down to some basics here. Let's talk about, well, let me. How would you even say that? Let I. How about that? Let I. You got it. So anyway, let's tone it down, lighten it up. Now, not so light that our brains float away, but things that are relevant to people in general, everybody, not any one particular. Let's just kind of get away from that national vitriol, hate, arguing, bickering bullshit that's going on in the country today. Come on, enough is enough. I will make this note. The 3 white guys that murdered the black guy in Georgia found guilty, as it should be. It's obvious. The evidence is clear. The jury made the right verdict. You're guilty, you're going to jail. Case closed. Moving on. All right? They had the audacity to claim self-defense. Are you fucking kidding me? Well, Kyle said self-defense. Well, yeah, because he was the other guy. He was the other guy who had a gun. So if the black guy in Georgia had a gun, and he had defended himself against these 3 white racist bastards, lunatics, then, different story, different scenario, and so on. But here's the thing, and I'm done with that kind of stuff. Let's try something else. Let's try something important to you and me and, other people like us. Well, nobody's like us because everybody's unique. Whatever happened to individualism? I remember back when I was in high school and college and stuff, I thought individualism, it was the thing. Nobody talks about that anymore. Why is that? It's all the collective now. It's like for everybody. It's one for all and all for all. You know what I'm saying? It's just, I don't get it. I mean, what happened to individualism? Like everybody's unique and everybody is their own person and individual human rights and stuff like that. Where'd that go? I guess the wackos took over. The freaks are in charge. And I don't mean just in charge of, let's say, the government or society in general, but they're in charge practically everything. So let's talk about some things that are a little bit less heavy than, some guy killing some people in self-defense or whatever. Let's talk about something like, all right, item 1, marriage. Now, I've spoken about marriage before, written about it extensively over the years. Still haven't written the book. I suppose I should do that. At any rate, I suppose I should do a lot of things because, got great ambitions, but not as much energy as I used to have. So here's the thing. Marriage. Now, I'll start. This is personal. This is individual. This is, a person and maybe another person and maybe a couple other people involved and so on. But at the same time, the subject of individual people in relationship to the concept of marriage I just sounded like a preacher there for a minute. Whoa. Or a professor. I don't know. At any rate, the thing is, you have to define the words, because words mean what they mean. And if you're going to just spout out words and then just say, well, the word means whatever I want it to mean, and that's not how it works. And oh, I'm going to change the meaning of the word because why? Because I have an agenda, and so on. And there's certain legal aspects of it. There are certain, how we say, religious aspects involved. There are social aspects of it involved with it. And so we can't really have a full, okay, let's say, discussion of the subject without talking about all of those details and intricate elements of the subject. However, and that would probably, if I actually went into it in depth and included all of those different elements, it could get heavy. However, it would still be individual or personal in the sense of, like, example, me and maybe another person. Now, if I was just me and I didn't have an intimate partner, or if I didn't have a personal, private, social arrangement meaning an arrangement that is within the scope of society. Not that it's society's business, but how do I explain that? Let's put it this way. If two people are married, say they're married, have some sort of proof that they are married in whatever nature that would be, then it's a good likelihood that their family knows it, their friends and neighbors know it, and so on. Their co-workers, if they work, in a place with other people working. People would know. People around the life of those two people, assuming two people at this point. There could be more than two people in a marriage. There could be more than, just one guy and one woman. I'm sorry, people. If you think that marriage is between one guy and one woman, you're wrong. It might be for some people, but that's not a policy. That's not some kind of law or thing written in stone. Because the word marriage means what it means. All right. It doesn't mean just what you think it means. Sometimes marriage means something else to somebody else. All right. So let's use myself as an example. If someone was to ask me if I was married, depends on who's asking, I would say yes. If somebody from the government was to ask me if I was married, I would say none of your business. I cannot see any scenario where it is any government person's business or any government entity or bureaucracy or whatever that needs to know if I'm married or not. Not one single government entity needs to know that. It's just not relevant to anything they would be involved in. Let's say, the government Department of Highways. Are you married? What's this have to do with me driving my car down the road? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And of course, you could say, well, if you're married and you have to have insurance on the car, and your wife and the husband probably need to be on the insurance policy, blah, blah, blah. That's not the point, is it? And that still doesn't have anything to do with the government. So marriage in the sense of government, not relevant. So if somebody from the government was to ask me that. So, however, was talking about insurance. I was talking about insurance. Let's say an insurance company and I want insurance coverage, health insurance, or medical insurance as it were. let's say I want insurance and I want to have a policy for myself and for my mate, spouse, wife, other person that I'm with, married to, living with, cohabitating with, whatever. So the insurance company says, is this a single policy? Do you want two policies, one for her and one for yourself, separate, but equal, I would assume? Nope, not really. Won't get into that right now. So an insurance company says, well, it's our policy, we'll give you insurance, but the mate, in my case, the wife has the insurance with her job. And now that she's retired, it's not directly related to her job anymore. However, so the situation is the insurance company wants to know if we're married, because the insurance company doesn't want to cover people that are not married to the person applying for the insurance. So at any rate, the insurance company says to my wife, are you married? And she says, yeah, because I want to add my husband to the policy. And so they say, prove it. And she says to me, we can't prove it, can we? And I said, of course we can. Because marriage means whatever the shit we want it to mean. And if they don't like it, tough shit. But they want to have that proof because they won't let me cover you, include you in the coverage if we don't have proof that we're married. So the insurance company obviously is asking, is she married by way of state marriage? Well, we don't want to answer no to that, do we? Because then I don't get coverage on her insurance policy as her family, as her spouse, as her husband. Now, that's a little bit of a problem because we don't have a marriage license or a marriage certificate issued by the state. And we certainly don't have anything signed by a preacher in a freaking church or a magistrate. There's a problem here. What are we going to do about that? Well, fortunately, I was well aware of the situation and well aware of the possibilities when it came to adding me onto her insurance policy. Because, I'm not totally naive, and I realized that possibility might occur. I didn't think they were going to ask for some kind of paper or document or something. I assumed they would take her word for it. But I don't know, guess not. So anyway, how do I deal with that? Well, as it turns out, I just happen to be an ordained clergyman. Which means I have the right, wait for this one, I have the right to marry people. That is to say, perform wedding ceremonies. A wedding ceremony, by the way, is just a ceremony. You might call it a ritual, a cultural, specific ritual. Now, I'm not going to get into how people get married or have wedding ceremonies in different countries, in different cultures, in different societies. China is one way, maybe in India it's another way, in America it's another way, and so on. And in America, there are many ways, depending on your persuasion or your inclinations to do that. Let me point out one thing here before I go on. State marriage is not, I repeat, is not marriage. State marriage is a program. And to keep it simple, I'll give you an example of a program. A program is something that the government has decided to be involved in and to do bureaucratically, and perhaps issue some sort of legal statutes, etc. That is an add-on to the basic function of government. And I want to point this out. Government has nothing to say about marriage, any kind of marriage, of any kind, anywhere, anytime, for any reason. It's just not their business. It comes under one of those inalienable human rights that we have because we exist, because we're humans. So, their little program, they added it on, like a little service. Like, we're going to add on the service of the marriage program that has, shall we say, benefits and so on. And I might point out that if you get a marriage license, you've just become a corporation. And guess what? Corporations exercise a privilege, which means you have gotten permission from the government to engage in a privilege. And if you call it marriage, then you've engaged in the privilege of being married. Well, since it's a human right, the government has no say in the matter, then the government has no say in whether you engage in that or not engage in that, or how you engage in that. A marriage program is added on. For example, the food stamp program, meaning it's a program offered by the government for people who may need food and cannot afford to buy it. Now, I'm not going to get into the ethics of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing that the government is offering food stamps, for example. It's another show. By the way, it's a socialist program. For all of you people who hate socialism, food stamps exist. It's a socialist program added to the government operations. Yeah, and I'm not debating that with you. That's a fact. So, food stamp program. What other programs we have? We have the, let me think. I can't think of anything at the moment. Let me pause and just give it a thought, see if I can come up with anything. All right, I came up with another thing. Here's the thing. Here's another example of a program. Social Security program. Medicare program. You get the drift. It's something that the government created and incorporated into its functioning as an option. You can apply to be a part of that program. Okay? So we have the program created by the government, in this case, invented by the government, because before, say, 1859 in America, state didn't have anything to do with marriage. Yeah. The marriage program was invented and established in 1859 in America. Now, there was another little area, colony up in New Hampshire or Vermont or somewhere that tried that program thing with marriage, incorporated it into the state or the colony or community, whatever it might have been up there. For a short time, it didn't last long. And I don't know the details of that. I just read about it somewhere. And it lasted for a while, and it wasn't really national. It wasn't really the whole society of America. And that was back in, I believe, 1700s, I believe. And it may have even been before the United States of America was established. But at any rate, you have food stamp program, you have welfare programs. Welfare programs. You have various farm aid programs where you can apply to the government and get assistance in various endeavors. Like, farmers can get farm assistance, crop assistance, the various programs that are available. Housing programs that are available. HUD, H-U-D, H-U-D, yes, HUD. HUD is a program. It's not a required thing. It's more of a privilege. If you need, let's say if you're in a situation of you need housing, you can apply to HUD and get some housing assistance. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. And you can qualify or not qualify according to the rules established by the program. So the same holds true with marriage, state marriage, or government marriage. It's a program invented to offer something, a service of some sort, to American citizens. By the way, you're not a U.S. citizen unless you're like a foreigner that comes over here and, like you're an alien and you come over here and you seek to be a citizen of the country. The government can grant you citizenship. So you become a U.S. citizen, much like the freed slaves back in the 1800s who were granted citizenship by the establishment of the amendment to the Constitution that outlawed. Now, I don't want to be saying things that are not exactly right, but as you should be aware that there were amendments to the Constitution, and slaves were freed. Telephone. And hold on here. Where was I before I got rudely interrupted? An option, a privilege. Now, you get into complications when you take a program and make it seem like or imply that it's not a privilege, or vice versa, by taking a right and then calling it a privilege, or taking a privilege and calling it a right. I'm sorry, it's one or the other. So since marriage is a right, joining this program called state marriage means you're joining a privileged situation. And when you get a marriage license, you've applied for a corporation as a marriage. It's, your marriage is incorporated, which means you're incorporated, and you no longer are exercising the human right to be married. You're exercising the privilege of being married, which is taxable, because privileges can be taxed. Rights cannot be taxed in America. All right. And court rulings have said so. So, you can look that up and find the exact rulings in the court cases where the rulings were handed down saying it's a right, it can't be taxed. I'm simplifying that, but, I'm sure the court rulings were like pages and pages and pages long, but you catch my drift. So, if you want to join a program of state marriage, they make the rules. It's their program. The government created it, and therefore the government created the rules, or regulations, as they say. So, in the case of state marriage, there are certain rules. And one of those rules is you can't marry more than one person at a time, or be married to more than one person at a time. That rule, or law, or regulation, depending on which way you look at it, applies to that program. It has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with whether you're married or not married. It doesn't have anything to do with your right to be married. To as many people as you can convince to marry you, for that matter. So polygamy, for example. And there are people who suggest, oh, yeah, polygamy is against the law, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, it's not. However, if you're going to be a part of the marriage program, the rules state that you can't be married to more than one person at a time. And they even came up with a word to describe it. Bigamy. So bigamy has to do with state marriage, and it doesn't really mean anything in real life. It's a part of that program, or the schematics of that paradigm. Since marriage is a right, you can exercise that right any way you want. To kind of sidestep in a related sense to something else, you have the right to practice your religion. The government does not have a right to control that. They can't tell you can or cannot be a Christian, for example, or exercise your right to freedom of religion by being, an atheist or a Catholic or a Buddhist or whatever. And yet, when it comes to marriage, they can tell you you can't marry this person. In regards to the government program. It doesn't have anything to do with what you do in your personal life, in your own home, in your own life, in your own affairs. If you don't join the program, the rules don't apply to you. You never agreed to be a part of the program. You never agreed to participate in the program or abide by the fabricated, arbitrary rules that they come up with. Those laws and rules apply to the program. So if you don't want to have to deal with the rules of the program and give up your right to marry and become a privileged corporation type situation, then don't become a part of the program. It's an option. You don't have to do it. At least as far as I know, there's no place in America, or the United States of America, where you actually have to get married whether you like it or not. And if you know somebody that's been in a situation where they were forced to be married by the government, you need to report that to somebody, because that's just, no. That is illegal as hell. And you know that. The law that says involuntary servitude and things of that nature. I'm not going to get into all the different situations and terminologies involved with that. But, if you're going to be married, you're married. It's what you want it to be, because it's a right, and you can exercise that right as freely as you can exercise the right of freedom of religion or the freedom of speech. Do we need a license to exercise free speech? Some people seem to think so, and some people seem to think that if you get the license to exercise your right to freedom of speech, by the way, that turns it into a privilege and not a right, so the rules don't apply. The rules of freedom don't apply. The rules of tyranny apply, because you're not free anymore. You don't have freedom of speech if you got to ask permission for it. It becomes a privilege granted to you by the government. And since the government is forbidden to do that, doesn't apply. All right. So you got the program. And by the way, a fraudulent program, seeing as how it is, it took like about 2 generations to convince practically every American that you have to get a license to get married and be married. Seriously. I've done a survey. I asked 100 people. Marriage, certified, marriage, license, all that stuff. I asked them in the survey, for example, what are the ways to exercise the freedom, the right to marry, be married, get married, and so on. And, you know, something like 98% of them said, you got to get a license for it to be legal, and so on. But they're wrong, because obviously they've been indoctrinated with this concept that somehow or another marriage has something to do with the government, which it doesn't, unless you join the program, in which case it has nothing to do with marriage. You're just joining a program and you're becoming an incorporated arrangement, a contract with the government, a privilege. All right, so we clear on that? Now, by the way, this is not debatable. This is true. This is just true. It's that simple. I'm going to argue and debate on that. No, you're not. Well, in the first place, monologue, you know what that means. Secondly, why would you argue about what's true? I have studied this subject. I am an expert on marriage and the government marriage program. Seriously, expert. I probably know more about it than marriage counselors and lawyers, divorce lawyers, for example. I'm going to get into that. Divorce courts and all that crap. And then, of course, you got to ask questions like, but what about if you have children? What about them if you get a divorce? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not talking about divorce on this segment. I'm talking about marriage, which is at the beginning, not at the other time down the road when you actually have children together. It's another program, another episode. All right. So we should be clear on this at this point. Marriage is a fluid concept. You define it. You're the one in that arrangement. You're the one that's saying to another person, will you be my wife or my husband? Or can we marry? Can we live together as a couple? That's between you and the other person or other persons. Oh, by the way, if you want to marry a tree, go for it. The benefits of marrying a tree are not, see, you're going to accuse me of trying to bastardize the word marriage or being frivolous. To be honest with you, you have the right to marry a tree. Now, what are the benefits of that? What are the obligations of that? What are the rights and privileges involved with marrying a tree? Now, you can laugh, fine. That's cool. I think that's a good thing to laugh. But you can't marry a tree as a part of the marriage program, because the marriage program has rules that says you can't marry a tree or a dog or a goat or your mother. So, yeah. Well, why would you want to marry your mother? But anyway, and I'm not going to get into all the other elements of marriage in other cultures, for example, Muslims and people having harems and 4 wives and all that stuff, or even historical situations and biblical mythological nonsense like so-and-so had like 900 wives and concubines or whatever. That's not relevant at this point. It goes under the heading, but it's, you know. And I did read a good book, and I really shouldn't bring it up since I don't know the title and the author at this point to give it to you. But I read a book one time, Marriage Throughout Time or the Ages, and how marriage has changed and how the conditions and circumstances and attitudes about marriage have changed over the years in America. And I wish I knew the title. I can't remember. But anyway, you could find it. It's on Amazon. The History of Marriage or something to that effect. Good book, and it describes a lot of the changes in society, American society, through the generations and so on. However, my point is, you got your marriage program, It's not marriage. It has nothing to do with your right to marry. The government can't tell you who to marry or who not to marry. For example, there was a time at some point where there were laws in states. I don't know if there was a federal law, but there was state laws that said, white people can't marry black people. It's just against the law. You couldn't even live with people of a different race. And today's society, you almost, your eyebrows almost like fall out thinking about the times when there was absurdity like that. Like, what do you mean I can't marry a black person? Yeah, well, there was a time when it was against the law. It was against the law to cohabitate, meaning you couldn't have a common law marriage or just move in with your girlfriend if she was, like not the same color as you, skin-wise. Fortunately, all those laws are gone. I certainly hope they're gone, because that would be, just insane for those laws to still be in the books. And I'm pretty sure they're gone. So, history. And that's a good thing, that things become history, and then we look back on it and say, that was absurd. Why would there even be such a law? So anyway, you have the right to marry. You can call marriage. You don't even have to call it marriage. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just shacked up with her. Yeah, well, if that's what you want to call that arrangement, fine. Government has nothing to say about that. At least not in modern society of America. Back in the old days, like I said, there was these monsters who thought that they could control who you love. Oh, well, then that brings up the gay marriage thing. By the way, same-sex marriage is not a proper English term. Sex is what you do with your sex organs. They're talking about gender. Because words mean what they mean. And I know the language evolves, but words still mean what they mean. If you change the meaning of a word, it's not that word anymore. Just a sideline here, the word whore used to apply to men. Think about it. Like, they wouldn't call a woman a whore, they called a guy a whore. And you thought the word whore was feminine. But originally, it applied to guys. What are you out whoring around again, are you? You whore, mister? It seems absurd to us to hear that. Well, it did when I first heard it. But I actually did the research on it. And, oh, yeah, that's where that came from. And society at some point back in, 1500s, 1800s, sometime or another in the past, the word whore meant, the guy, not the woman. All right. What else we got? Well, this might be a little choppy, this episode, because I stopped and continued. And so I may have deorganized it a bit as I was telling you these various aspects of marriage. And at the risk of repeating myself, let's sum up. Marriage is a fluid concept. It can be whatever you want it to be, because that's the way rights are done. Rights can be exercised in whatever way you freely decide to exercise them. And since marriage is a natural, unalienable human right, and perfectly natural, so nature's laws kind of apply there a little bit, yeah. So you can decide what you want it to be. You can call that arrangement whatever you want. Now, there's common law marriage, and there are certain, shall we say, standards involved with that in the old days, for example, everybody was common law married because common law didn't have a bad stigma to it. It was just marriage. You got married, and probably got married in a church with a preacher or a minister of some sort. You had some sort of ceremony. Now, that's the thing here. It's a ceremony. It's not really of any real significance. I mean, it's significant in the people participating in it because, oh, it's a grand wedding and it's wonderful and we had a great experience, blah, blah. But legally speaking, it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with anything. You can make up your own marriage, wedding ceremony vows, which are significant to you. There's no standard legal form to say. I mean, like at the end when the guy says, whoever says, authority vested in me, I now pronounce you man and wife. Really? The old-fashioned days, that was it. Really? Man was like, man. And then wife was like, yeah, you're my wife. I own you. Then they changed it, hopefully everywhere now. And it's husband and wife because that's what he's announcing. He's announcing you're a husband now and you're a wife now equally. How about just, I now pronounce you a couple, a marriage, a family, etc. Maybe in the future they will evolve and become more enlightened and actually do away with this pronouncing you husband and wife thing altogether, and it'll just become, I now pronounce you a couple or a married couple or whatever, something to that effect. So marriage is what you want it to be. I've said this several times now, and you may not agree because you don't understand, because you've been indoctrinated. And I was talking about that a minute ago, about how in 1859, and I suspect this, I am not saying this is absolutely historically fact. I'm saying that it seems to be a possibility that this happened. That in 1859, the white people thought that were in power in the government and so on, and possibly religious people, Christians, were saying, we don't want all these black people. They're going to be free one of these days. They're not going to be slaves anymore. They're going to get set free, and they're going to want to be normal and regular like everybody else. They're going to be equal, and they're going to be able to marry our white women. And I suppose it's possible that they would want to marry, the white women would want to wear, the black women would want to, you know what I'm saying. They would want to marry the two races, intermingling and getting married and having families, mixed races, marriages and stuff. And we can't have that. And how are we going to stop it? Well, when they're freed slaves there in a few years, probably after this war that's coming, yeah, it's like they knew. It's not like they were stupid. Not like they were totally oblivious to the reality of the world. Slavery was on its way out, and they knew it. And they said, the racists of them, the racist ones said, we don't want them marrying, the white people, getting married to the black people. That's just unacceptable. So we're going to control society, and we're going to manipulate society, and we're going to make a rule saying they can't do it. Because they're going to want to. So let's make it against the law. But we can't just come right out and say it because, well, actually they did, but in a federal sense, let's say, they said, let's just be subtle about it and just say you got to get a license. Well, there went the right to marry out the window. And it took about 2 generations. Oh, by the way, Abraham Lincoln was the last president to not be married in the marriage program. He was actually married in common law marriage. And like I said, the stigma of common law marriage today means, you're just shacked up, which is not true at all. There are rules involved. or procedures to go through to be common law marriage. Just shacking up is not marriage. Unless you want it to be, in which case you're not just shacking up then, are you? However, I gotta go. Time's up. I'll talk to you again on this, continue this on the next episode. I'm sorry.